All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Keith White with the National Weather Service Office, Austin, San Antonio, and today we're going to talk a little bit about what's occurred over the past few months and what we can look forward to this fall, what our third straight year of La Nina will mean for our area, and some of the more impactful weather that occurs in our region through the fall months. We'll talk just a little bit about the possibilities beyond this fall as well. So just a quick outline. The summer in review, obviously, it was very hot. May, June, and July, all three of those months were the hottest on record in both Austin and San Antonio. Interestingly, in well over 100 years of data, that was the only time that we've had three straight record hot months at Austin. The only other time at San Antonio that happened was in 1892, when there were only 7 years of data to look back upon. It was also mostly dry for the most part through the majority of the summer, but we did have a bit of a change in weather regime in the second half of August. Portions of the region, especially southwestern areas, got quite a bit of rain in the second half of August. In fact, there was a 15-day stretch where Del Rio got more rain in those just over 2 weeks than San Antonio had seen all year up to that point. Despite those cooler temperatures as a result of some of that rain and additional cloudiness, it was still a warmer than normal month of August. As we look ahead, another year of La Nina conditions in the fall into the winter. Weak to potentially moderate La Nina is expected. That'll typically lead to warmer and drier than normal conditions through the winter here in South Central Texas, although not always, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Drought is likely to persist this fall and return in areas where we've seen improvement back to abnormally dry status. And fire weather may become an increasing concern later this fall into the early winter. So starting here with a look back at the meteorological summer months of June, July, and August. Obviously, I already mentioned it was the warmest June and July on record. If you take the whole 3 months, good portions of the hill country, as well as in San Antonio, did finish with their warmest summer on record, even warmer than 2011. For the city of Austin, it was the second warmest summer on record, largely due to the rain and the cooler weather that we saw towards the end of the month. Even in Del Rio, second warmest summer out there, they saw much cooler temperatures in the second half of August, and their 26th wettest summer on record. And of course, we all know there was a lot of 100-degree days. There hasn't been one in Austin since the 20th of August. Today could be that day. It's going to be pretty close. We're forecasting a high right near 99 or 100. We'll see how it works out there. But we're tied for the second most number of 100-degree days all time there, and have also seen the second most in San Antonio and Del Rio. Just looking at the year as a whole. So that includes 100-degree days prior to the beginning of meteorological summer. Looking back at some of the rainfall, this is the percentage of normal looking back over the last 30, 60, 90, and 180 days. And you can see that for portions of the Rio Grande Plains, the Southern Edwards Plateau, and portions of the hill country up, especially in Llano, Northern Blanco, and Burnett counties, they did see some decent rains above normal over the last month. Enough that even looking back over the last 3 months, many of those areas still saw above normal rainfall. But if you look at our more populated areas along the I-35 corridor, particularly from the San Antonio metro area, northeastward up into Austin, many of those areas unfortunately did not pick up on nearly as much beneficial rain as we would have wanted. And looking back at the long term, a lot of those surpluses start to go away. In the past 6 months, really only a small portion of our area and pretty rural portions of the area, northern Valverde County, Dimmitt County, and much of Maverick County, are the only areas that saw above normal rainfall when looking at the last 6 months as a whole. Meanwhile, less than 50% of normal rain for much of the San Antonio area, and then up through New Braunfels and towards San Marcos. And so as a result of those rainfall deficits ongoing, we do still have some drought conditions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. First, I do want to talk about sort of our climatology. So on the left here, is the total number of severe reports broken down by event type and by month. And as you can see in the fall, really the most common thing that we see is flash flooding, although during our secondary wet season, we do have a slight increase, again, in instances of thunderstorm wind damage. Occasionally can see some hail return, but clearly our most common time period for that hazard is back in the spring. Looking at average temperatures, as of today, the average high temperature in Austin is down to 90, and that will continue to fall through the coming months. So, much more comfortable weather is on the way, I promise. I know it certainly doesn't seem that way given, just how warm it has been for the vast majority of 2022. But we are still technically in our secondary wet period. Haven't seen quite a lot of rain here in the past couple of weeks, and there aren't really good signals for a whole lot more, at least in the short term. But we're still looking at a time period where we could see decent rainfall here in October. Hopefully we'll get another pattern shift beyond what we can currently see. Looking just over the course of the week 2 period, so that's the end of September through the first week of October, it does look likely that above normal temperatures will continue on average through that period. In fact, the Climate Prediction Center Hazards Outlook does have us in a slight risk of returning to excessive heat for a couple of days there in early October. Southern portions of our area, the signal not quite as strong, but still leaning warmer than normal. And also odds tilted towards drier than normal conditions over that time period as well. Some of you are asking, well, what about over the next week? Not looking at a whole lot of rain then either. Could see an isolated shower or two along a front that'll push through on Monday, but probably not much of anything. Most folks will be dry over the next week and likely to remain drier than normal the week after that. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the El Nino Southern Oscillation. La Nina conditions do remain in place, and they are likely to continue through the fall months and into the winter. You can see here on the left, the probabilities do begin to diminish pretty significantly as we head through the winter and into the early spring. Now, officially, these outlooks don't go past the April, May, June time period of next year. But what I can tell you is that after a third straight year of La Nina, the chances of a fourth year of La Nina are very, very, very low. In fact, that's never happened before in the record. And many people are looking at the historical data and thinking we may even have a better chance of an El Nino for next winter than neutral conditions. Just a slight tilt there. But that's so far out that there's no way to have any sort of confidence in what the ENSO state might look like, a year from now. In the meantime, those sea surface temperatures in the tropical Eastern Pacific do remain below normal. And that will have an impact on, pardon me, that will have an impact on our weather as we head through the fall and into the winter. Here's a look at a new product that shows the probabilities of what the strength of the La Nina will be. And so those sea surface temperature anomalies less than minus 0.5 degrees Celsius, that would be a weak La Nina. If they go below 1 degree Celsius, that would be a moderate La Nina. Right now, for the fall into the early winter, it does look like about a 50-50 shot at a moderate La Nina, but certainly a weak La Nina will continue here through the fall months. So what does that mean for us? Well, a lot of you have been on these calls before and know a lot of what I'm about to say. Here in South Central Texas, generally we do see warmer than normal conditions and drier than normal conditions through the October through December months during La Nina. And I broke this down. This map is by Climate Prediction Center division. And so I broke this down and looked just at this one for South Central Texas that includes Travis County and Bexar County, and then goes down outside of our area to the coast. And this is looking at actual observations over the course of the 1950 to 2021 period. And I want you to focus on the left side of these two graphs here. And that's when that oceanic Nino index is less than minus 0.5. So that's when we're in La Nina state. And clearly, we're off the charts in terms of the percentage of the time that we are above normal on average through those months for that region. And the same goes for precipitation. This is a very strong signal that our precipitation will be below normal most of the time. And of course, you can't forget about these other times. There have been years where a La Nina winter occurred and the opposite of what we would normally see happens. One big example of this is actually 2011 into 2012. Obviously, everyone remembers the big 2011 drought, but the winter of 2011-2012 was a La Nina, and we actually saw above normal precipitation that winter, and drought improvement occurred through the winter months. Obviously, can't say that that's a likely possibility for this year, but it's certainly something that the folks are hoping for, given that many areas are still in drought. So here's a look at our climate forecast system model. Its outlook just through the October through December months, and really the entirety of the continental U.S. is expected to see on average above normal temperatures. Obviously, that won't verify everywhere. Some locations probably will end up cooler than normal, but our multi-model ensembles follow this pattern pretty well through this period. And the same goes for precipitation. The signal is stronger further to our east in terms of, and this is, let me be clear here, this is an anomaly map, so this is the expected change from normal. So stronger red here means drier than normal, even more so, than in the orange. So we'll have a stronger signal there over our eastern areas for drier than normal weather. Rough estimate is that this model expects maybe a 20% reduction in our normal fall precipitation. So the Climate Prediction Center updated their outlooks last week, and they're, pardon me, they're showing odds leaning towards above normal temperatures through the month of October for our region, and maybe a slightly weaker signal, but also leaning towards drier than normal conditions for the month of October, especially over the southern Edwards Plateau. And then over the course of the October through December period, they're pretty confident in a likelihood of above normal temperatures. And again, those odds lean towards below normal precipitation, which is what we normally see. That doesn't mean everywhere will be hot and dry. There will certainly be colder periods. We will get cold fronts. But when we average things out over the course of those 3 months, there's a good chance that hotter and drier than normal conditions will be the end result. There's a lot of different ways that could look, though. Some of you may remember last winter, the month of December was the warmest on record for the entire state of Texas. But then January and February actually ended up cooler than normal. But those temperature anomalies in the month of December were so off the charts that when you averaged the 3 months, the winter did end up above normal in terms of temperatures for the entirety of South Central Texas. So, it's not necessarily that it'll look like that this year, but there's a lot of different ways that you end with an average of above normal temperatures. And we'll see in a few months what that means for us this year. So back to the drought. Obviously, those rains that we had the second half of August into early September made some improvements, and you can see that there are some areas where drought is no longer in place. Northern Valverde County, Lee County, and then down into the coastal plains. However, the San Antonio area and then up into Comal County and portions of Hays and Blanco counties did not benefit nearly as much, and so drought continues. Reservoir levels remain somewhat low in many areas, and as a result of that and our continuing expectation for warmer and drier than normal conditions, drought's likely to expand back into those areas that aren't currently in drought and may worsen in other areas over the course of the fall. There could still be some improvements if we get some decent rains later in October into November. But on average, looking at the bigger picture, drought conditions look like they'll be likely to expand and worsen somewhat. Looking just currently at stream flows too, many of our basins are still seeing below normal stream flows. I want to talk just briefly about fire weather. Many of the areas that received pretty substantial rainfall we'll see a reprieve for the course of the next few weeks. Unfortunately, some other areas may still see increasing fire weather risk over the course of the coming weeks and months. Not maybe so much in the short term, but we do expect an increase in fire weather potential as we look ahead. And in fact, the National Interagency Coordination Center has issued outlooks. Let me pull those up. Issued outlooks for November and December that do indicate above normal wildland fire potential expanding across our region later this fall into the winter. Lastly, I do want to talk about the tropical outlook. Obviously, it was a slower than normal start to the season, but we've really started to ramp up here over the course of the last week. This green arrow shows where we're at in terms of the Atlantic Basin climatology. Clearly, there's still a long way to go in the season, and there will likely still be a chance for us to reach that near to above normal expectation in terms of both the number of named storms and in terms of accumulated cyclone energy. But for Texas, we really see our season ramp down significantly once we enter October. Impacts to Texas are rare in the month of October. And so with the ongoing Tropical Depression 9 now looking less likely to move into the Western Gulf, as time goes on, we're looking more likely that Texas will not see any impacts from tropical systems. Not a guarantee just yet. We do still have another week or two of keeping a close eye on things, but nothing on the horizon and no expectations at this time for any impacts to Texas. So to wrap up, with antecedent dryness and warmer and drier than normal conditions, favored, the risk for flooding will be lower than normal this fall. However, we will see an increasing risk for fire weather. Looking like a lower than normal, impacts from tropical weather this year, and drought will likely again become an increasing concern through the fall months. Thank you for bearing with me. Sorry about my voice. My throat's a little dry today. I am happy to answer any questions. All right, I see a question here from from Brett. When do you expect our next possible freeze? Well, it's hard to say for sure. There's quite a variability in first freeze dates in our region. Last year was interesting in that we didn't get our first freeze until January. It took all the way until the new year. In some years, it's happened much earlier, as early as early November. In the recent past, at this time, really impossible to say exactly when that would happen. I will add that you can find the information on the average first freeze for our climate sites on our website. That would be at weather.gov/EWX/climate. And that's broken down at our 4 climate sites: Camp Mabry, Bergstrom, San Antonio, and Del Rio.